Sullivan, and I do a lot of stripes with my quilts. As you can see back here, I have a couple of examples of the improv quilts that I like to do with a stripe technique. So when I'm doing stripes, I like to use strip piecing, and strip piecing is a pretty common technique in quilting, but when it comes to improv, instead of wanting all my blocks to look the same, I actually want them to look differently. So because of that, I do have to change the technique a little bit, and that's what I want to show you today. So to give you an example, this would be a piece that I would cut up into my blocks for strip piecing and for my improv. What I'm going to do for today is actually make a block that looks like this with 3 colors, and I want to walk through how I do this and what techniques have to change in order for strip piecing for improv to work correctly. So I start out just like with regular strip piecing. I do start out with stripes or with strips, and with improv I tend to just pick up strips. Either I'll just whack off the end of some yardage or what's left over from a project. Because it doesn't need to be completely straight, it's perfect for this technique. And as you can see here, this particular fabric is not cut very straight, but it's perfect for what I'm doing. So in order to do this technique, I need to clear the board here. I want to lay out my fabrics such that they're overlapping. And because I want them to be each block to be different, I don't want it to be straight across. I do want to have this, this angle here. And you can change it up however you want. It's your improv, your rules. And this looks good. And the thing to make sure is that the fabric underneath is far enough underneath that I'm cutting through both the top and bottom fabrics. So I do use a ruler to make sure I get a straight line. If these were prints, you'd want them to be right side up. And just cut that. Get rid of this. Uh-oh. And one thing to make sure is that you'll have a little bit left. Oops. Just cut that up. You'll have a little bit left underneath, and you do not want to sew that in, so make sure you also discard that. And the reason that we want to cut it this way is just so that once it's sewn, you still get these straight edges. If you've ever sewn strips together and it goes off in different directions, that's because you didn't do if you don't cut it this way, that's what will happen. So then, just like everything else, right sides together. And we'll sew this together. All right. And you can pin if you want. With improv, I don't generally pin just because it's so much more forgiving with the sewing. I do try to keep it at least 1/4 of an inch seam. Just because I do want it to be structurally sound. You line it up and keep sewing. And because of the way I cut them, I know that they'll fit together perfectly. All right. Now with stripes, I always like to press all of my seams. You can press them open or closed or to one side. It's up to you. I do like to do them open just because it helps it lay a little bit neater. And I often finger press first. And when I'm pressing seams open, I press both sides, and I'll use a spray on the other side, just again to help it be flat. Okay. And this helps it when you do your subcuts, you want your fabric to be as flat as possible. All right. And then from here, to get to this, I actually fold this in half, and I'll finger press so I know where to cut. And I don't use a ruler because it just doesn't matter. And then I can sew these together and I'll end up with a bigger block like this. This only works if your strips have different colors on top and the bottom, otherwise you're sewing the same color together. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, it's the same technique. We want to make sure that you're cutting through the top and the bottom. Get rid of this. And again, you got to watch this. You don't want to sew that in. Right sides together. And again, you can pin if you'd like. And then once again, we'll press this open. Try to press this open. All right. And like I said, with stripes, you end up with so many seams that the more you can do to make sure it stays flat, the better. So, little quick spray. All right, so now that I have this, I can start doing my subcuts to get my blocks. So the first step is, of course, to trim up the side. And here, it's up to you to decide how big you want your blocks to be. I often work with 2.5-inch strips just because I find them to be really versatile. So there's one block. The second block. And you can already see how different these are. And if I put them together, you might not necessarily know that they came from the same block. All right. And so with this size, I can usually get 4 blocks, which is about what I want for my quilts. And there you go. So this is how I use strip piecing techniques and how I change it up to do improv strips where I want them all to have a variety of blocks when I'm done. So this is how I use a modified strip piecing technique in my improv work. And I use the same technique in quilts like these. And you can see that the blocks, while they're made from the same strip pieces, are different.